Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Hello and welcome again to the fourth block, second unit, part 2 of the session on change management in the course Organizational Behavior, being offered from Chaitanya Studio, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. I am Margi Parikh. I am a professor at BK School of Professional and Management Studies, Gujarat University. We have been, as part of this block, we have been exploring issues or processes such as motivation, leadership, conflict and change management. This is, in this last session, we are going to tackle one of the most challenging processes that confront managers, and that process is management of change. Our learning objectives from this session are to understand the characteristics of effective change management program and understand the key factors involved in the effective change management program. The word program suggests that change which is inevitable is planned. Of course, as you know, many times the change takes place in an unplanned or sudden or accidental way, and sometimes the change is brought about by even errors. But we cannot wait for chance or error to happen, and therefore what managers do is they plan the change. You may ask what kind of change, and that is the change that takes the organization or a unit of the manager from its present state to the desired state. Companies which refuse to change over time do not survive. You may be able to think of a number of examples. For example, Nokia, which was a pioneer in the early stage of mobile telephony, what happens was eventually the company could not keep up with the pace of change in the industry and it fell behind. This kind of examples can be seen everywhere. You can take an example of Ford Motors, or you can take an example of which was that camera. Can you look for me in the camera industry, one company which was a pioneer and then it faced a lot of challenge because it did not adapt fast enough with the change. So the word is adaptation. When the environment around the organization changes, especially when the environment is complex and when changes are fast, the organization also needs to change to keep pace with the organization, and that process is known as adaptation. What managers need to do is manage the change or adaptation process effectively so that the organization can remain in step with the environment and does not fall behind. What is the importance of change management? You will be able to now tell me rather than me telling you. First of all, if the change management is effective, then the managers can steer the organization through the unforeseen, often ambiguous, uncertain phase of or process of adaptation. What happens is, when the change is proposed, it is not that everybody will enthusiastically embrace the change. There will be some people who will say, no, we do not want to change. No, we are better off as we are, let us not change. And that all is called resistance to change. But if the planning of change process is effective, then the managers will be able to tackle the resistance of change in an effective manner, and therefore by that they will be able to respond not only to the challenges in a gainful manner, but they will also be able to realize the opportunities which are offered by the changing environment. So what we are talking about when we mention change is that the system or the organization is in the current state in this particular place. Why that organization is placed in this particular point is that there may be a number of driving factors or forces, but there will also be a lot of restricting forces. For example, if an organization is poised at number 4 in the industry, then there may be the driving factors, for example, the top management being ambitious, or they being able to successfully gather the support of shareholders, and their new issue of share capital might have been subscribed very well. So people are also hopeful, but at the same time the technological advances that they are not able to break through may restrict them in their current competitive position. Of course, the organization wants to move further and do better and achieve a better market share or better competitive position. For that, maybe they need to strengthen or find more driving forces. So, for example, not only the resources and not only the top management guidance and ambition, but maybe they also need to search for talent which will help the organization overcome the technological barrier. So they also need to find more driving forces and weaken or reduce their restricting or restraining forces. So this is how, if the organization unfreezes itself, so when the organization let us say realizes that there are a number of restricting forces, but if we move from this position to that position, there are benefits to be had. So these are dissatisfaction from your current position, seeing the benefits of the future position. These are all the factors which cause the organization to unfreeze itself from its current position. Then change is a process where the managers or managers, with the help of change agents and change leaders and support from the change top management, will introduce stepwise interventions which alter the current state and take the organization to the desired state, and there by offering rewards and by motivating people to repeat a new set of behaviors in the which are required in the new state, what the managers do is help the organization get refreeze itself in the new status. So if that is the change management, what are the key lessons that we need to learn so that as a manager we can practice change management more effectively? One is realize that change is all pervasive. Pervasive is something which exists everywhere. So no matter what you do, you will find the requirement or the need to change. If you are in a senior position or in a junior position, if you are already employed or if you are seeking employment, if you are responsible only for your performance or you are responsible for other people's performance, no matter what you are talking about, you will be facing change, and change is the reality of life of every manager or every person who aspires to be a manager. It doesn't matter whether the organization you work for or organization you create is a large one or small one. It doesn't matter whether your organization exists in a traditional industry or a modern industry. Change is everywhere. Maybe the rate of change may be different, the scale of change may be different, the complexity of change may also be different, and risks also may be different, but that does not, none of that changes the fact that you will face change. It is all pervasive. Second thing we need to realize by way of managers of effective change is that effective change needs active senior management support. So you may be the one who has brought the idea of change, you may have the expertise, you may have the resources for change, but what happens is once you start the process of change, it is going to unfold over some time. It is going to create the kind of questioning, doubt and resistance in the minds of many people who are going to resist your initiatives or the moves. In that kind of a scenario, it is possible that lot of political maneuvering will take place, lot of conflict will come out into the open. Sometimes more dangerously, there will be conflict, but it will be playing out in a hidden form. So how will you be able to respond to conflict if it is not even in open? All those kinds of challenges are addressed if you have the support of senior management. What happens is, when senior management says that we want to change, it brings a very different kind of authentication to the requirement of change. And with the highest authority, if the idea of change is introduced, then the acceptability of change also is better. And this kind of authentication, support and validity will also secure for more resources in the future if the change management is going to last for longer time. Change is a multidisciplinary activity. So whatever is the current state of a system, which could be an entire organization, it could be a department, it could also be a subsection or a section of a department. But whenever change takes place, multidisciplinary knowledge or multiple resources are required. So a one person with expertise in one field is rarely able to introduce change in an effective manner, and therefore what this means is that a person who wants to manage change should be open to creating a collaborative atmosphere where a team is created by different people who bring in different expertise, different experiences and diverse range of skills and opinions, so that together they can solve the complex problems which are involved in the process of change. At the fourth number, we have being people at the center of the process of change. You may argue that, well, sometimes the change can be effected by simply changing the technology. So, well, wait for a moment and tell me what happens when old technology is removed and new technology is brought in. Are people not involved? In the new technology, for example, in case of this classroom, traditionally you would have been sitting in a classroom, I would have been standing before you and would have been delivering a lecture. But under new kind of technology, the class has become virtual. But has the change only been brought in terms of machines? What about the people who will operate the technology and people who will accept the product of that technology? If the people who are customers or consumers of technological changes, if they do not accept, or more challenging for the managers, if the people who are required to switch from use of one technology to another, if they do not accept the new technology, how is the new technology going to be implemented or put to use? Therefore, anybody who has anything to do about change management should not focus too much on the physical resources such as money or such as technology, but instead focus on the people and their attitudes, so that they become more open towards the change, so that they understand why change is required and how they will be affected by the change, especially how the change will benefit them. So what the manager often needs to do for people is not only tell them why change is required, but also define for them or clarify for them how they are going to be benefited by the change. If that happens, then maybe some of the fear for change, some of the doubt for change in the minds of people will be removed and will be addressed effectively. At number 5, we have the fact that change is about success. You may hear a lot of quotes which say that there is nothing like failure, either you succeed or you learn a lesson. Well, that is not false, but when you put the whole thing in the context of an organization, nobody wants to fail, because sometimes when you face a failure, it costs the organization a lot, not only in terms of resources but also in terms of reputation, and sometimes the failure has very serious, sometimes grave consequences for the stakeholders. For example, if a pharmaceutical company develops a new drug and somehow when the drug fails, what happens to the people who took that drug? Maybe they lose life, maybe they are rendered incapacitated and so on. So those consequences are very serious. Because of that, sometimes the organization as a whole can be shut down. Maybe the organization is not allowed to continue any longer. So managers have to be very cautious to make sure that they do not fail, because the consequences of failures are often irreversible and failures are very costly. So one may not have control all the time, but managers should be very careful about designing or planning or implementing the process of change so that they can enhance the chances of success. At number 6, we have again perception coming into picture. As you remember, in case of conflict also perceptions were important. Why perceptions are important in case of change is people who are affected by change, they are going to think about whether they should change or not. How they are going to decide is on the basis of their perceptions about how the proposed change will benefit them and how the proposed change will result into some kind of damage or loss in terms of their interest. If you remember, when we were discussing motivation also, especially when we discussed equity theory, we said that everybody makes a kind of mental ratio of the inputs they give to the organization in terms of efforts and the benefits they receive in turn against their inputs. Now both the efforts or inputs they give and the rewards they receive, both are in terms of a person's perception, and when they compare it with the same ratio for somebody else, that is also based on perception. Here also likewise, a person who is affected by change is going to perceive some benefits and is going to perceive some costs or some damage, and therefore a manager who is proposing a change or manager who is implementing a change program should be very careful in communicating and in demonstrating the ways that people minimize the errors in their perception. At number 7, we have the point saying that effective change requires competent change agent. We have mentioned this term earlier. Who is an agent of change? Somebody who brings a new idea or a new proposition that the system or the entity requires to change from current state to another. Sometimes the environment surrounding the organization or the unit changes so slowly or in such a subtle manner that it is difficult for people to realize that change is required. It only becomes apparent by way of some indicators. For example, if people are dissatisfied, the people may not openly tell their management that they are dissatisfied, but people who are dissatisfied may lose their interest in whatever they are doing, and therefore either the production volume suffers or the production quality suffers. So when performance suffers, or when lot of people choose to leave the organization, so there is lot of employee turnover, or when there is lot of absenteeism, or when there are lot of deviant behaviors, for example people working very slowly or people stealing, so those are the indicators that tell the managers that there is need for change of some kind, so that the people do not feel so dissatisfied or they do not feel so negatively about work. So what happens is, for people who are involved in that process, it is difficult to realize, but sometimes when an external person comes and performs the analysis, the need for change becomes apparent. That person is called the agent of change, who introduces the need for change and who brings about or who volunteers to implement change. Such change agent can be internal and can also be external in terms of, let us say, a consultant. Of course, the change agent will need to work. If the change agent is external, that person will need to work very closely with the managers of the organization, so that the initiative of change is effective. We have at number 8 this idea that in terms of methodology, there is no one best way. As we have seen, change is about people and their perception. It is about a very complex process of adaptation, and therefore you cannot have one best solution or one best method. Just like we said that change is also not just about technology, or it is not just about one thing. Change usually involves requirement of diverse resources. It also requires expertise of a number of people. So one person cannot bring about change, and likewise the one method cannot guarantee success when you are trying to implement change. So what a person needs to do is realize that change is fraught with lot of risk, but at the same time it will be very costly to commit a mistake, and therefore a person has to very carefully analyze the situation of change and be willing to deploy a number of methods. Some methods may produce quick success, whereas some methods will produce results in the long run. Some method may work for just an individual, whereas some method may work for a group, and some method may work for the organization. So a person who is interested in planning change and bringing about planned change should be open to deployment of multiple methods as required. At number 9, we have this idea that tells us that change is about ownership. Ownership not of physical resources, not owning, no, it is not like owning the organization or owning a car or owning a pen, but ownership of the process. This kind of ownership idea comes into light especially when something challenging happens. If a lot of people are resisting, if lot of challenges are facing the change management program, if lot of people are losing interest, maybe everything was started in a very nice way in the beginning, but after some time everybody began to lose interest, who will still retain the ownership and who will say that if nobody does anything, it is all right, I am going to continue doing what I am doing and I will make sure that everybody comes back and rejoins the team. So that one person needs to retain the ownership for the process, if not for the outcome, so that one can persevere, because we know that change sometimes can take very long, change can be very risky. You may take one step forward, but you should be prepared to take 2 steps backward. When all those things are happening, when there is lot of resistance from different parts of the organization, when people are sometimes losing motivation and resigning from the process of change, in all those challenging circumstances, it is important for the manager to retain the ownership of the change management. And lastly, we have this point that says change is about fun, challenge and opportunity. Are you asking me how the 3 can be put together? Well, in case of business or in case of work organization, it is not very difficult to imagine how. A business opportunity may arise, but the opportunity may involve a lot of technical or social challenges before the opportunity can be realized in terms of concrete or quantifiable goals. So while the people need to work at resolving challenges or responding effectively to the challenges, that entire process of overcoming the challenge should be fun. And fun does not always mean going to watch a movie or eating popcorn, but a lot of times fun is created when people face a context where they are collaborating to face tough challenges, to when they are confronted with the task of solving some difficult problems. People think that work is really fun, because that is how they can not only affirm their own skills, but they can discover their potential and develop new skills. So interacting with others, learning from each others, appreciating other people's flair for problem solving or flair for tackling difficult assignments, all of those are the elements that may make work a kind of fun for us. So with this, we are beginning to near the end of this session, but before we go, we need to see the characteristics of effective change management program. The motivating change by creating readiness for the change among employees, that is what managers need to do. So any effective program would motivate change among whom? Among the people who will be more ready to embrace the change rather than oppose the change. Another characteristic is creating shared vision of the desired future state of the organization. When we discussed leadership, we had mentioned leaders having the vision, but if vision is residing only in the mind of one person, it may have no use. But effective change management program communicates with people in a way that the vision becomes shared, and lot of people believe in that vision and they want to realize that vision. And if realization of that vision requires change, then they become more open to accepting change. Third element is developing political support for the needed changes, because whether we believe it or not, politics is a part of organization's reality, and one cannot deny politics all the time by saying that it is bad. Politics may not always be bad, and therefore a manager should be open to development of political support. Managing the transition from the current state to the desired future state, that is inherent in any change management program, but importantly or equally importantly, effective change management program will sustain the momentum for change so that it will be carried to its completion. So initiating change is not the only thing, and once you start changing, it does not mean that you will reach where you wanted to. Many times the enthusiasm gets people or organizations or departments to change, but after a while they come back to their original state. So sustaining the momentum for change is also very important. With this, we have come to the end of this last final session in this course, organizational behavior. Today we have discussed the process of management of change, especially management of plant change. So we saw what is the process of change, and we also saw how managers can effectively manage it. Thank you for being us so far. Wish you all the best, and goodbye from all of us here.